Dillian the Body Snatcher right here. It's a champ. Big up to Sporting Icon. Subscribe. Otherwise, I might pay you guys a visit.
Right, I hope everybody is doing fantastic. Now, Frank Warren, he's shown some sympathy and understanding towards Dillian Whyte and his whole predicament as to why he hasn't had his WBC World Heavyweight title shot yet. But of course, you know, he will be throwing shade on Eddie Hearn. That's standard procedure, isn't it? But we're going to get into Frank Warren's statement. Then, of course, we'll all sit around a campfire and have a little bit of a chat about it. And this is what Frank Warren had to say. You can see why Dillian Whyte is upset. He doesn't feel like he's been looked after. At this point, Dillian must be wondering if he's ever going to get a world title shot over there. If Dillian was with me, he would have fought for a world title by now. I had Tyson Fury fighting for a world title within 6 months of signing with him. We kept him nice and active, and then we got him the Wilder fight. Look what's happened since. Tyson is an absolute global superstar on the verge of the biggest contract in boxing history. It's incredible, really, what's happened with Dillian, really. He was ranked number 1 with the WBO for God knows how long, ranked number 1 with the WBC, and he's just not got the fights. If I were him, I'd be asking the question, why hasn't my promoter been able to get me those fights? He's on about suing the WBC, but they don't seem to be the problem. It's remarkable, really. I can't think of another British fighter who's been left out to dry as much as him. He was in the same stable as the WBO World Heavyweight Champion Anthony Joshua and still couldn't get a shot. You can see why he's upset. He doesn't feel like he's been looked after. At this point, Dillian must be wondering if he's ever going to get a world title shot over there. So Frank Warren's statement. So I suppose in a nutshell, what Frank Warren is really saying is there's nothing that Dillian has done wrong. It's the fact that he's with Eddie Hearn. Now, I've heard quite a few people in boxing tell me pretty much the same things, which is the WBC, Mauricio Suleiman, isn't the biggest fan of Eddie Hearn. But he does respect Eddie Hearn. He's just not the biggest fan of him and doesn't particularly want the WBC Heavyweight World title under the guidance of Eddie Hearn. Now, there are quite a few reasons as to why people have said that, but we're going to get into that one. But is it a case of Frank Warren, he's just having a dig just for the sake of having a dig? Maybe, of course. Does he want to try and create some kind of unrest between Dillian and Eddie Hearn? Yeah, maybe. But when he's going on about Tyson Fury, how we kept Tyson Fury nice and active and then we got in the Deontay Wilder fight, that's actually not true. If we're going to be brutally honest here, that is not how it happened. Because, first of all, Tyson Fury was not active. Okay, Tyson Fury was out of the ring for 2.5 years, fought Fury, the number 2 cruiserweight in Albania. And then, when he signed up to fight Francisco Pianeta, he also signed up to fight Deontay Wilder next, straight after. So, you can't really be busy if you've just fought Fury and only had one fight in 2.5 years. So, from that point of view, you can't agree with Frank Warren from that perspective. But again, what Frank Warren is not telling you, it's not a case of that Frank Warren went out and sought after Deontay Wilder, the WBC Heavyweight World Champion, and had a good relationship with Mauricio Suleiman, all that kind of thing. Because Fury, he come out on his own social media and said, hey, Wilder, clearly Joshua don't want the fight. I'll fight you. Wilder looked at it and went, well, Tyson Fury, he is a big name. He ain't nowhere near ready. He's been out of the ring for 2.5 years and only fought Fury. I'm going to blast him and I'm going to get that name on my resume. And of course, I'll be called lineal heavyweight champion. So it was a case of Tyson Fury went after that fight and Wilder gave it to him as a voluntary. So it had nothing to do with the WBC. Had nothing to do with them whatsoever. Had nothing to do with Frank Warren either. But of course, Frank Warren, he had to negotiate the deal, the terms and everything with Shelley Finkel, Deontay Wilder's manager. So from that perspective, I do understand what it is that Frank Warren's saying. But at the other side, it is a case of Deontay Wilder cherry-picked Tyson Fury. But looking back at it, I suppose we could say that Tyson Fury cherry-picked Wilder, but Wilder just didn't know. We could look at it that way. Now, if Dillian Whyte was with Frank Warren, would Frank Warren have got him that WBC World Heavyweight title shot? Possibly. Very, very possibly. But on the other side, Wilder, he never once fancied the Dillian Whyte fight. He openly said to Dillian Whyte on his private DMs, which, of course, Dillian Whyte did show the world this DM, was where Wilder said, I ain't got to fight you. I ain't signing anything, even if you do defeat Luis Ortiz. I ain't signing anything. I can freeze you out for 2 years if I want to. These are Wilder's own words. So it was more a case of Wilder didn't want to give it to him and the WBC was backing him up. But with the WBC backing up Wilder, because Dillian Whyte was a Eddie Hearn fighter. Now Dillian, he is his own manager, and Dillian has a fight-by-fight deal with Eddie Hearn. So maybe we could look at it the other way and say, well, Eddie Hearn has quite consistently said, those who are loyal to me, I will put in the extra work for you. So Dillian, he doesn't have a long-term contract with Eddie Hearn. It's a fight-by-fight deal. The last thing in the world that Eddie Hearn wants is to get Dillian Whyte a world title shot, and then Dillian buggers off to another promotional company. So it's a bit of a risk-reward kind of thing for Eddie Hearn from that perspective. But I do feel that it doesn't matter who you're with, it doesn't matter who you're promoted by. Whether Dillian is promoted by Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, Mick Hennessy, Phil Jeffries, Steffi Bull, Bob Arum. It doesn't matter who you're promoted by. If you put in the work, then you should get your world title shot. It's as simple as that. So while I understand what it is that Frank Warren's talking about, and of course there are things that I'm not going to say that I've heard about, but from one perspective, he is correct. I think that it's not about what Dillian Whyte has done wrong. It's more about the relationship between WBC not particularly getting on with Eddie Hearn. They respect him, as I said, but they find him arrogant. I think that's probably the best way of putting it with certain things that's happened in the past. But with Tyson Fury global superstar, absolutely, yes, he is. But he did that. Frank Warren's had nothing to do with it. He's had very little to do with this. Frank Warren, he's not putting on Tyson Fury fights. Frank Warren, who has only really put on Seferi and Francesco Pianetta. That's the only real fights that he's put on. Of course, he had a hand in the Deontay Wilder first fight, of course. But since then, he had nothing to do with Tom Schwartz and Otto Wallin and the Deontay Wilder rematch. I mean, of course, he would have been kept in the loop because he is the UK promoter of Tyson Fury. But of course, MTK are the ones who are making the deal. So I suppose it really depends on how you look at it. But this is more a case of Frank Warren, while he is telling the truth from one perspective, where there's a very good chance that he would have got Dillian Whyte the WBC World Heavyweight title shot had he been with him. But at the same time, I don't really know what the relationship is with Frank Warren and WBC President Mauricio Suleiman, or the WBC in general, because when you look up and down of Frank Warren's stable, even for the last few years, he doesn't really have WBC champions. He doesn't. They're all WBO. So his relationship is with the WBO, much like Bob Arum's is with the WBO. Look at Frank Warren's stable. Look at all his world champions. They're always WBO champions. They always get ranked very, very highly within the WBO because Frank Warren has a good relationship with the WBO, which for me is complete garbage. For me, no promotional company or manager or anybody should have a biased relationship with an organisation. Nobody should have that. Al Heyman, he has that with the WBC. Look at his stable. Most of those are WBC champions. Frank Warren, Bob Arum, WBO. IBF and WBA, do they have better relationship with Eddie Hearn than what they do with Frank Warren and Al Heyman? Maybe. But again, we shouldn't really be having any of this bias. But when it comes to Dillian Whyte, it shouldn't matter who you're with. And that's the truth of it. It shouldn't matter. Honestly, it shouldn't matter. But when Frank Warren is saying how he got in the Tyson Fury fight, and that's a bad example, because that was just a cherry pick that went badly wrong for Deontay Wilder. Because honestly, I think even if Dillian Whyte was with Frank Warren, I don't think that Wilder would have given Dillian Whyte a world title shot anyway. He's got this thing about Dillian Whyte where for some reason he's frightened to death of him. And that's true for it. But again, with Frank Warren, when it comes to Dillian Whyte, wasn't Frank Warren one of the people who were out with their knives and daggers out towards Dillian Whyte? Where's the B sample? Dillian Whyte is a two-time drug cheat and he should be banned from the sport and all these kind of things. I mean, not exactly those words, but words to that effect. So I don't really know why it is that he's saying that, especially when Frank Warren, on the very same day, yesterday, when he put out this statement, he was posting out what it is that Tyson Fury said about Dillian Whyte, where Dillian Whyte, well, this is what Tyson Fury had to say. When the time comes, I'll put Dillian Whyte in his place, then I'll then I think he will have plenty more to worry about with the likes of Daniel Dubois, Joe Joyce and Povetkin, who he's fighting next. And that's the kind of thing that Frank Warren put out there. So it's almost like he's justifying his WBC heavyweight champion Tyson Fury bypassing Dillian Whyte. Because Tyson Fury saying, one day, sure, I'll fight him, but he's not really in my plans. If I was Dillian Whyte, worry about Povetkin next, and then maybe look at the winner of Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce. But it shouldn't be that way. In theory, Dillian Whyte shouldn't even be fighting Povetkin next, let alone another one after then before he gets a world title shot against the winner of Dubois and Joyce. Dillian has jumped through more hoops with the WBC than Tyson Fury has, more than anybody else currently has. So from that perspective, I can totally disagree with Tyson Fury. So where Frank Warren stands, this is just another opportunity to have a go at Eddie Hearn. But I do think it's a justifiable dig at Eddie Hearn because of the many things that I've heard about the relationship with the WBC. But anyway, that's Frank Warren's statement. Drop your thoughts below. Click thumbs up, subscribe. Catch you all on the next video.